Isn't that right, kid? Oh, sure. As soon as I start recording, you look away. Hey, kid. Hey, kid. You see that up there? You see this up here? It's a tablet. It's a tablet. See this? That's a tablet. You're a good boy. Yeah, you're a good boy. Yeah. It's a good boy. No. Go on. Go on, beat it. I'm trying to do something. I know, buddy. But I got it. Alright? So, not even sure where to start right now. Nope, not even sure of where to start. I guess I'll start with a statement I was thinking about. So I've said it before, and I'm saying it again now in some aspect, and I'm going to keep saying it till I get it through my head, I guess. The purpose of these videos is not to make content. It's not the point. This is me documenting a journey, I guess. And if I get there, great. But this is watching me get there for me, and if I do get there, for anybody else that cares about watching it later. I guess I shouldn't have to say that so much, but you know, high neuroticism and imposter syndrome's a bitch. As is that light. There we go. Well, started off with a kid because it's important to remind yourself of what things mean something to you. It's a really important part of life that we forget a lot of the time. So where am I trying to get exactly? I guess I'm trying to find the center of my circumambulation, if you will. Circumambulation being was it Nietzsche or Jung? I think it was Nietzsche. It was one of the two. The concept was that throughout your life you will see these points of flashes of light or some such that interest you, and when you see the interest, you should pay attention to it because you're going to keep going around there no matter what. And I think anybody that's been alive for any amount of time has experienced this phenomenon, feeling this inherent interest and this draw to do something, and not doing it, that's bad. That is bad things to you, but you'll keep going back there, right, over and over again, ergo the circum of ambulation. So really what I'm trying to document is, what is my circumambulation trying to tell me I should be doing? Because you can't dictate your interest. Your interest sort of comes to you, it flashes to you in moments. And learning to follow it and see it for what it is and try to do it in spite of the bad things that may happen as a result. No. In spite of the bad things that will definitively 100% happen as a result. In spite of those things, you should still do it. So where are you taking me, brain? Where exactly is it you're trying to get me to go? I know I see people. I know I understand them. In fact, I know I understand them. It's funny. I've thought very often about whether or not I'm a psychopath. don't think I am, but that's not the important point necessarily. Well, I mean, it's part of the important point actually, but because I got to there eventually. You know, your interest you can't necessarily dictate. You're gonna have intrinsic interests and preferences or predilections, if you will, that you're not necessarily going to be able to control, but you're going to be able to try to not humor them, if you will. But back to that. So, my interest has always been people, right? Trying to understand why my parents were the way they were, trying to understand what that meant and how people function, and what makes someone do the things they do, and how can someone do something horrible when they feel like they're doing the right thing, like, because that's how we do virtually all horrible things. Nobody does. Even psychopaths, for the conversation, even psychopaths think they're doing the right thing, right? So everybody thinks they're doing the right thing. So how can you be so right on the right path of trying to be good and then be so wrong in how you do it? That was sort of what interested me, and that's always sort of what has interested me. Not because I wanted to it wasn't knowledge for knowledge's sake. I wanted to know how to not do it myself. I think that's really what I cared about, is I want to know, how do I not do this? And I felt, so in regard to me thinking, whether or not I'm a psychopath, part of why I had to deal with that a lot is because my intelligence, my observation, my interest, and I could see and understand people very well. I'm trying to make sure I'm using the right word here for this because it's important, but usually better than they understood themselves. And trying to talk about that with the person you're observing is challenging, because people don't like seeing things about themselves. People don't like knowing the honest truth about themselves. Like, we all want to think we're intrinsically good. We all want to think that we're inherently positive beings, that, our heart is in the right place and we're trying to do the right thing. So learning that we may be doing something that's bad, that's counter to our actual objective, and actually not compassionate but the opposite of compassionate, that's not a supposition that most people can entertain, because it challenges the bedrock of your foundation of your identity. Because if you think about yourself, if you think about you and who you are, you think you're a good person. No, I'm bad. I have all these problems. Even the worst of people that think that they're awful and they're terrible and they're catastrophic and broken, they feel that they're broken because their heart is feeling the right thing. So people don't feel they're bad intrinsically, necessarily. But part of why I sort of struggled with trying to figure out whether I was a psychopath was because when I would make these observations and take note about these things of people, I would tell them these things that I saw, and they would tell me how wrong I was and how evil I was, and how can you say something like that about me? I was young. I didn't know any better. I thought, Jesus, what is wrong with me? Why am I seeing that? Why am I seeing this thing that I'm saying about these people that's obviousto so completely wrong? Because clearly they obviously know themselves, right? They would have to. So why are you seeing that, Robert? What the fuck is wrong with you? Not a lot, honestly. And that took me a really long time to figure out. One of the ways that I figured that out over the course of time was, it's the same thing I was saying talking about ego. When you say something positive about yourself and someone says that you're being egotistical, humility is just another form of ego. Trying to be humble so that people will heap praise on you for your humility is just your ego talking. At some point, if you're Kobe Bryant and you say, I'm an all right basketball player, like, you're being an asshole, right? Because no, you're not. You're a really good basketball player. You're fucking Kobe Bryant, right? Don't be an asshole about it. So trying to, be humble in the face of that. Genuine humility is not about saying something so people will not think you're grandstanding. Genuine humility is about understanding that you can be wrong at any point in time and doing your damnedest to not be wrong because you know how catastrophically wrong you can be. That's humility. Saying you're not that great so people won't think you're being an egomaniac, that's not humility, that's ego. So, why I mention that is because part of what helped me figure out I wasn't a psychopath, that I wasn't just seeing all these awful, worse things in people, was people over the course of time would come to me sometimes 5, sometimes 10 years later, telling me I should talk about this stuff, I should write a book about it, and telling me how right I was about the observations I made. And at some point, I wasn't able to keep track of the amount of times that happened, whether it was a week, whether it was a day, whether it was a year, whether it was 10 years. Like, oftentimes people would come back to me saying that, and even when they didn't think that, even when they didn't say that to me directly, later times when they interacted with me, I could see they held me in a higher regard than previously, and not through anything that I'd done since then that would have merited a higher regard. Not just that they'd become better, more centered, more well-balanced people. It was me specific. It's not me being an egomaniac. It was me paying attention to what they were thinking, what they were saying, what they were doing, and how they acted to other people versus how they acted to me. It wasn't me being an egomaniac. It was me paying attention to the fucking details. Wow, I'm getting really good at predicting that light. So part of what helped me learn that I wasn't a psychopath was, one, my observations were often correct, just people weren't comfortable with realizing that my realizations were correct or my observations were correct. And two, why was I doing it? Why was I talking to them about it? Why was I saying why was I saying these horrible things about their behavior and their characteristics? And I wasn't doing it to try to manipulate them to an end so I could attain some sort of personal gain. The reason I was doing it was because I genuinely gave a shit about the person and I wanted them to be happy. That's not something a psychopath does. I wasn't doing some like CEO hand wringing to try to let them see how disappointed I was in their behavior so they would learn to be deferential to me. That wasn't the point. The point was I could see that they were suffering in ways that they didn't even know they were suffering, and I wanted to point it out to them so they knew what direction to go in. So they knew how to become happy, so they knew how to become better and more fulfilled. That's what I cared about. Genuinely, like truly, like watching people go through that stuff and try to deal with the darker demons of their nature, like that caused me more emotional fatigue and stress than seeing a bad person do something bad to a good person. Seeing a person who was trying to be good do something to themselves that was bad, that was the worst thing I ever saw every time I saw it, and I saw it everywhere. Because everybody does it. Everybody does it. Without fail. Without exception. Without question. So I wanted their lives to be better. So I wanted to point out the things that they were doing bad. It's just, people can't accept that stuff. People don't want to hear that. People don't want to see that. It's not even that they don't want to. It's that they can't, man. They can't. But the consequence of that was people telling me, how could you say something like that? You're so evil. And I believed them for a really long time. That's unfortunate. But I guess if it was a necessary step for me to understand and learn it on my own, because that wasn't something I was taught that people were going to do. That was something I had to figure out. Maybe it was worth it. I don't know. I don't know for sure. It doesn't feel like it was worth it. I can tell you from my end, it doesn't feel like it was worth it in the slightest, but maybe it was. So for my circumambulation, the thing I keep coming back around and around to is, how do I show people how to not make themselves suffer? Seeing people make themselves suffer, it's like inside me, I can't take it. I mean, People talk about the evils of, gosh, I mean, whatever. Pick your oppressive category, right? The evils of the white man's regiment, the patriarchy, and police enforcement of black neighborhoods, but honestly, the worst crime that I ever see is the crime that a person perpetrates on themselves to make themselves suffer when they don't know what to do about it. For all intents and purposes, they're effectively attacking an innocent, unarmed civilian with their ideas of how to try to do the right thing, and they're just tearing themselves to pieces, and they don't see it, but I do. And it's like, thankfully, I don't cry myself to sleep about it anymore, because I used to. So, thankfully, I don't do that anymore. I can function relatively well in spite of it, but that's the thing my circumambulation keeps coming back to, is how do I teach people to not do that? It's like, if you learn how to ride a bike, say for example, it's maybe a bad example, but just let's go with it. You learn how to ride a bike. No, that's a really shit example, actually, so let's pick a different one. If you learn how to fold a t-shirt, right? Someone shows you how to fold a t-shirt. Once you learn how to do it, it's very easy to do it. It's very easy to replicate. But if nobody's shown you how to fold a t-shirt, like, how many ridiculously folded t-shirts have you seen in a dresser? Right, it's ridiculous. The amount of ways that people can fail at folding a t-shirt boggles the mind. It's really, it's something. It's something else. But once you learn the proper steps to it, it's not hard to replicate, and you feel good doing it. And I can't help but think the method to teaching people to not suffer and impose self-suffering like that has to be similar. I'm sure it's more of an elegant problem than solving how to fold a t-shirt, obviously. How could it not be? But I don't think it's any less prescribable. I don't think it's any less discernible. I don't think it's something that we can't figure out the steps to and condense them and crystallize them down into steps that people can follow. I don't think it is. I don't see how it could be. Operating an automobile is a complicated operation. Driving a car is complicated. But once you learn how to do it, it starts to feel almost habitual. It starts to feel like almost like an extension of who you are. It starts to feel automatic. And I gotta think that whatever this is functions under the same rule set. I can't imagine it doesn't. But it's just the problem is so complicated and so seemingly vast, and like, I often find myself wondering, how have we not figured this out yet? And maybe it's because we have so many people arguing that they all think they know the right way, and the right way is, follow Jesus or be an atheist or whatever some particular person sees as a balm to their particular suffering, which is the wrong thing, but it's the thing somebody else told them, and it seems like it's better than the thing before, so that's what they do, so they maybe suffer a little less, which I suppose in and of itself is potentially a good thing, but there has to be a way to do this. There has to be. There has to be a way that you can figure out a methodology that you can teach people growing up that aren't actually broken in their brain, that don't actually have a physiological problem. There has to be a way that you can teach them to be a functioning human being that does not do that to themselves. There has to be a fucking way to do it. There has to be. Some people do it. Ergo, there is a way to do it. Ergo, we can show everybody how to do it. That has to be true. But it's a lot like, Elon Musk said the reason he likes Edison better than he likes Tesla is because Edison brought his ideas to market. So it's not whether or not there is a way, because the way exists. The way exists, I'm sure of that. I'm positive of that. I don't necessarily know it, but I know the way exists. I know it does. I know it. But how do you identify it? How do you architect it? And how do you make it something that you can, in effect, bring to market? Because again, that whole concept of bringing it to market, that's the same thing I was talking about in regard to distilling an idea down to its simplistic aspects so anybody can understand it and everybody can sort of sign on with it. Thou shalt not kill. Whatever this method is, it's going to be complicated, but being able to take the complexity and boil it down to the simplistic steps that are going to be useful or provide the result in 70, 80, 90% of people, like, that's an achievable goal. We can totally fucking do this, so why haven't we done it yet? I think part of it is because of the polarization of ideals. One of the things I often say about myself, maybe it's in my hubris, I don't know, but one of the things I say about myself is I care about being right. I don't care about feeling right, which isn't 100% true, because obviously I care about feeling right. There's a feeling that's associated with being right, and Justin vindicated that. Of course I feel, and of course everybody feels, but more than that, I care about being right. And part of that is because I found being right, and I mean actually having the right answer, the actual right answer, because it exists for virtually every question. Having the actual right answer has a special kind of significance and satisfaction to it, and often has people calling you a psychopath. but knowing the right answer is different than just believing something and not even believing it, just feeling like you have to adhere to the belief, because to not adhere to the belief challenges your very existence, so you can't disacknowledge the belief. Knowing the right answer is special. It's distinct in the pleasure it gives you. It's a whole lot harder to get to, but it's I'm trying to figure the word to describe it, because it's hard to describe it. It doesn't feel better necessarily, no, because being ignorant and feeling indignantly righteous in spite of your ignorance feels really good, which is part of why you have so many people that are so polarized on topics talking about things. And people talking about Kanye going to the White House and saying this is what happens when Negroes don't read, and thinking they're being funny. Being indignant and ignorant has a really satisfying sort of like texture to it, because it's easy, right? It's easy to do that and get that high. And maybe if you're so interested in trying to find the right answer, maybe part of the problem with it is that you're never satisfied after you find the right answer, because there's another right answer that's coming right after that. You don't get to just sit there and call people racists and feel good about yourself, because after you find another answer, all that meant was you have somewhere else you have to go next, and you don't get to stop. So maybe it's not that finding the right answer is more satisfying. Maybe it's just that it actually provides a value. Because I'm not sure it does feel as good, honestly. I'm definitively not above having been ignorant in my assertions or views about different things and different people. And when you do it, man, it feels fucking good. It feels really good. To say, I'm so smart, you're so dumb, and yeah, like you just, feels fucking great. But it's shit. It's garbage. So where are you taking me, circumambulation? That's really what I want to know. Because you're trying to pull me out of whatever the fuck this is that I'm in. And you've been trying to for decades. I was thinking about rent-seeking behavior, which is a funny term, but part of what got me thinking about this was I was listening to Sam Harris talk about Kavanaugh and the way he was constructing his Bayesian model about how Kavanaugh was clearly guilty, and saying things like he's in the same generation, so he knows what Booth means for that particular group, and it's the important thing that revealed to me is, I'm thinking about all the stuff that I'm thinking about, and I'm trying to think of how to figure out these problems, and I'm looking at these people that are brilliant and learned and well-renowned for their knowledge. And I was listening to Sam Harris talk about Kavanaugh, and it was lazy. Like, his logic was lazy. And it wasn't even that I wanted to support Kavanaugh or not support Kavanaugh. Like, that wasn't at all the point. Like, just the way he was thinking about it was lazy. And I was thinking, why is he doing that? It wasn't, oftentimes when you have a disagreement with someone about something, backfire effect, right? So let's say I was really pro Kavanaugh, and I thought, what's the term, due process, and I thought all this blah, blah, blah. I thought the counter of Sam Harris's argument. And then Sam Harris makes his argument. The natural inclination to think is, well, I'm going to find any reason to tear it down because of backfire effect, because I want to figure out how I'm right and he's wrong. But see, the thing was, is that wasn't the question that came to my mind at all, of whether or not he was right or he was wrong. I mean, it did a little bit, but I'm rehearsed enough with that particular idiosyncratic behavior of the human mind that I'm comfortable with recognizing when it happens, and usually I can shut it down when it starts. So, I heard him talking about clearly Kavanaugh was guilty of this, and I was like, no, he's not. And I was like, whoa, stop, Robert. Is that your actual problem? Is your actual problem with what he's talking about that you think, Kavanaugh is or is not guilty? And I was like, no, that's not. That's not my problem with it. My problem with it was that his arguments were intellectually lazy. And it made me think about his arguments about, free will, and why free will wasn't a thing, and thinking of, 3 different cities or whatnot, and how that was an intellectually lazy argument. And this is, I don't think Sam Harris is not a brilliant person. I do think he's brilliant. But it made me start thinking, why? Why is he doing that? And it started making me think of the difference between someone like him and Jordan Peterson, right? Because there's a interesting attribute that Peterson has that I think is actually probably one of his more brilliant attributes, which I don't know whether or not anybody actually recognizes this for the gravity that it actually has. I'm sure people recognize it and they think he's cool for doing it, but Jesus. The thing that I'm talking about, when you hear Jordan Peterson talking about stuff and being toward the boundaries of what he understands, like, what he's doing is he's signaling you to understand, hey, don't take what I'm saying as sacrosanct fact. This is me trying to understand something. I don't understand. I don't necessarily understand, but so far I'm thinking this. And it's almost as if he's looking to you as like, do I sound right? Do I sound crazy? And almost like he's looking to himself to say, do I sound right? Do I sound crazy? But there's a lot of intellectuals that are doing podcasts or whatnot that don't do that the same way Peterson does. And honestly, I think that's one of the things that makes Peterson a more brilliant intellectual than a lot of people are, and a lot of people give him credit for necessarily. Even the people that think he's brilliant, I think a lot of them don't understand precisely how brilliant he is. Like, he's earth-shatteringly brilliant. But so why? Why would Sam Harris, brilliant guy, why would he be so intellectually lazy in an argument? So that's what got me into rent-seeking, right? Because there's something that a lot of intellectuals are doing in regard to doing their intellectual pursuit, which is trying to give consumers something to consume so they can utilize their podcasts or their book tours or whatever to, make money so they continue in this pursuit. But part of what you need to do in order to do that is you need to be providing people value in the thing you're saying each time you're saying something, which is kind of a problem because if you're saying things that you don't necessarily understand, but people are coming to you for an intellectual source of like, how should I think about this thing? There's a weird dichotomy that can form there, right? There's a weird sort of like funky, almost parasitic symbiosis where it's like we're looking to you to tell us how to think about something, but you may not necessarily know how to think about the thing that you're thinking about, but you can't necessarily say that. You can't necessarily present that in that light. If you're just another guy asking questions, why the hell should I listen to you? Right? Which is part of why I think Peterson's so brilliant in what he's doing, because when he's doing his book tour for 12 Rules, and I've watched some of the different recordings of him, like he's rarely talking about the same thing, but so this is a complicated topic, so it's going to sound weird, but the rent seeking, I think, is to provide instant value, but I think one of the differences in people that listen to Sam Harris versus people that listen to Jordan Peterson, and I feel like I'm bashing on Sam Harris, which I don't intend to do at all. Dogs. Yeah! It's okay, pups. I feel like when people give money to Sam Harris for one reason or another, I think they're giving him money for a finished product. But I think when people give Jordan Peterson money, I think they're giving him money to enable him to continue his research. And that's a very important fundamental distinction between the two. What's up, dogs? What's up, sunshine? It's all right, girl. Everything's okay, girl. Yeah, you're all right. We're all right back here. It's okay. And if you're an intellectual that's trying to solve a complicated problem, the chances that you're going to have a finished product every time you're opening your mouth is nil. Like, it's not possible. All right. Sunshine, come here. Come here. Go inside. Go inside. Inside. Hey, kid, come here. The dogs. You guys stay inside. Hey, kid. Kid, come here. Kid. Inside. Inside. Okay, you can take the ball. Go inside. Come on. Come on. All right. Well, just relax, huh? Be quiet. Relax. Relax. So that's what I mean by rent seeking when I'm talking about it, because every time some of these intellectuals talk about something and broadcast something, I feel like maybe they feel like they're under pressure to provide some sort of like erudite insight as to what we're supposed to be thinking and feeling about a particular thing at a particular time, but like you can't maintain that pace. You can't do that every single time, right? The amount of if you understood as much as you were broadcasting that you understood, like the world would already be solved. Like you can't be being that profound in your finished and refined knowledge every single time you open your mouth, which is, like I said, the distinction between him and Peterson, right? Peterson, when he talks, come on, go inside, buddy. Go inside. Good puppies. Peterson, when he talks, he's working through a problem. People are watching him work through a problem. They aren't watching him having already arrived at a conclusion. But if you're going to make your living as an intellectual in this world of podcasts and sponsorships and, ad click revenue, you have to be illuminating something every single time you're talking. And I think people that are intellectuals feel like potentially they have to be doing this with some sort of like finalized realization, but I don't think that's necessary, honestly. And I think if that's the vehicle you have to take, then maybe you're not good enough to be doing it, honestly. I don't know, maybe that's harsh, but I've been thinking about whether or not there's any sort of like world for me getting recognized like this and being an intellectual, and if, feeling my obvious, bouts of jealousy you would feel about other people that have sort of like achieved this ranking. They just get to talk about the things they're thinking about and work through these like thought problems and somehow get paid for it and be lauded for it. And, obviously there's a little bit of envy that would arise there for someone that is a self-identified intellectual, but I don't even necessarily know that I would be one of those people or how I would handle it or whatnot. But that's sort of also part of what I'm thinking about, because if you're going to do that, you don't want to be rent seeking. You don't want to be doing it for the purpose of paying your bills necessarily, right? I mean, maybe you can pay your bills with it, and that's great, that's phenomenal, but trying to generate content for the purpose of making money off of being an intellectual, when the primary path of being an intellectual is about trying to solve complicated problems, and those take years oftentimes. And that's one of the reasons I really think Peterson is sort of a different animal, because I think to some extent he recognizes that, maybe, and if not to an extent, he's definitively doing it. He's not necessarily always selling a finished product every time he talks in front of people. Oftentimes when he talks in front of people, he's selling, I'm trying to figure this shit out. Would you like to watch me do it? Which I think is a better way to go about it. So if you are going to be an intellectual, I guess, in this space, first off, probably want to have a way to make money that's not necessarily doing that thing. And if you are doing that thing, I think probably a better way to go about it would be to do it from the frame of mind where you're asking a question and trying to figure out the answer in front of people, rather than saying you know the answer and explaining why people should think that way. I think. So why that came about, and why I was thinking about that, and why I was thinking, is he being intellectually lazy, and why does it bother me, and is this rent-seeking or not, and what is rent-seeking behavior, is what does an intellectual do, is going back to my circumambulance, right? So if my brain, or my soul, if you will, is trying to tell me there's a thing I must do, how do I do it? Do I try to figure out how to get people to listen to me? And try to figure out the best way to polish my words in such a way that I can present a finished product? I don't think so. I don't think that's the role of the intellectual, honestly. I think oftentimes the role of the intellectual is to be obscure and be someone nobody's ever heard of, until the point that maybe you die. Or maybe if you're lucky enough, a lot of people hear about you while you're alive, who knows. Am I saying I am one of those people and I can be one of those people? Like, fuck, man, I don't know. I have no idea. But I think the rest of me is trying to tell me that's who I'm supposed to try to be. Whether or not I am. It's like I can even feel it right now. Just I'm lit up upstairs. Like my brain is lucid and it's clear, and there are precious few times that happens like that. That I feel such a clarity of motion and purpose, and feel so abjectly terrified of it at the same time, and that I'm not good enough, and that I am a failure, and that I'm not everything that I say I am, or that I don't have the potential to be the thing I want to be. Like, of course, everybody goes through that. But I'll tell you what I want, man. What I really want. And it's not a zig a zig ah for any Spice Girls fans out there. Here's what I really want. What I want is for every child in this country and eventually the world, I want them to go through school and go through all the problems of, rising through adolescence, because there are a ton of them, right? And I want the experience of school to be as such that it teaches them how to actually shape themselves into the proper vision of who they want to be, or at least starting to get on the path of who they want to be, and know what they have to do to at least start walking that direction. I don't want it's not that I want them to come out of school knowing what they want to be. It's that I want them to come out of school knowing that they know how to find it. That's what I want. That's what I want for everybody. You may not know what it is you're supposed to be. You may not know what it is your circumambulation is trying to point you at. You may not understand it, but you need to understand it's trying to point you at something. And you need to have an idea of how to chase and follow that. And then not have your, hippocampus trigger because you reached some point in your perceived model of reality that conflicted with your desired outcome of your perceived model of reality. That you need to understand that that's part of the process, and that you need to feel like that's okay. I want every kid to come out of school not necessarily knowing where they're going to go, but I sure as shit want them knowing how they're going to get there. That's what I want. That's really what I want. And I'm positive there has to be a way to teach them that. There has to be. And there has to be a way that people, whether or not they see the truth of it immediately, they'll see the truth of it through the results in a way that they can't deny. And the way that they got to the results won't feel so morally reprehensible to them that they can't tolerate them. There has to be a solution to that. There has to be a way we can do that. There is a way we can do it. We just have to find it. And I want to find it. So I think rather than starting with the rich people necessarily, Autumn taking a shower. I think rather than starting with the rich people, you need to start with you. And don't try to do it as your job. Don't do it to seek rent. Do it to find the answer. And the truth of the matter is, if you find it, you're not going to live long enough to appreciate it. You're not going to see it. You're not going to get to revel in the fruits of what you did. But it'll be better. And if you're not here to do that, Robert, what the fuck are you here to do?